back to another episode of Breaking Boundaries, the world's premier podcast for international students, or at least it's up there. I am honored today to be joined by Daniel Truesdale, the Director of Enrollment Management and Analytics for the Master's Program in Applied Data Science at one of the world's premier institutions, the University of Chicago. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, for international students who may not be familiar with Chicago, let's ground them in place and time. So the University of Chicago's primary campus is in a leafy neighborhood called Hyde Park, a little bit south of downtown. But your particular program is downtown. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes. So you have that right. Hyde Park is about 7 miles south of when people think of Chicago. They see the skyline. They see the if you're from Chicago, the Sears Tower, not the Willis Tower, the Sears Tower. But it's about 7 miles south, and that's Hyde Park. And in Hyde Park, you have a lot of the, more of the traditional classical college campus feel, a lot of classical buildings. Matter of fact, for those who want to kind of Google search this, U Chicago had a lot of possibilities for being for the Harry Potter franchise. It was kind of like always the backup if we can't get this library that's in London, we're going to go to U Chicago. So it's a cool fact to kind of look up. It's something that I like to share because I'm a Harry Potter fanatic. But what's nice is that even though our program is in the NBC Tower, which is in the Chicago Loop, and the Gleacher Center's there too, that's where the booth students in the part-time booth will take classes. We have a shuttle service that connects students from Hyde Park to Gleacher to NBC and vice versa. And plus, being in the third largest city in the U.S., public transportation's not going to be an issue. You have what people would call kind of like the subway system. We call it the L, public buses, and then obviously taxis, Ubers, etc. So it's a very walkable city, and it's a very connected city, which is great. We always joked when I used to live in the city with my wife, we'd always say one car is one too many. You do not need your own car to commute within the city. It's very connected.
That's correct. Well, for the audience, I lived in Chicago for a decade. It's where I met my wife, and we had our first child. So the fix is in. I love the city. I think it's the greatest city in the world. And I did own a car for a couple years in Chicago, and it just collected dust on the street, and we ended up selling it. So
and parking tickets, probably.
Oh, yes. Yes. It's very, very arcane and confusing parking rules. So yeah, don't bring a car. You don't need it.
You do not need a car.
And another fun fact for folks overseas, Hyde Park is the neighborhood where former President Obama once lived. I don't know if he still has a house there, but that's to give you an idea of the pedigree of the neighborhood. Amazing collection of food and used bookstores in both places. And then you're also right in the neighborhood of the Wrigley Building and the Tribune Tower, which
correct.
Are these Gothic? Is that the architectural style? They're beautiful buildings.
Yes, I mean it's definitely one of the big components, the Chicago River. So we're right on the Chicago River, which it's a very gorgeous place to be. What's really cool to see is it's a very lively city, and especially where we're at. We're right by the Mag Mile. We're in the center of everything. So you're in the heart of the city when you're in NBC Tower, Gleacher Center. Never an endless supply of things to do as well. The city is constant. You have Millennium Park. They host different events and festivals. You have the Taste of Chicago. You have the Chicago White Sox, Chicago Cubs, Chicago Bears, sporting events, the Chicago Fire. I know I was driving to work the other day and I saw that who's the famous soccer player from the Messi. Messi's going to be coming and playing against the Fire, and so they play right in Soldier Field. And the city has a cool history to it. It's maintained its character. Obviously throughout the years, and so it has a really cool history. The other really neat thing too is we have 77 unique neighborhoods in the city of Chicago. So you have different cultures that you're able to tap into very easily just by going to different neighborhoods. And so, if you're in the mood for Italian, you can find Italian. If you're in the mood for Chinese, you can find Chinese. If whatever it may be. And so that's really cool to see. And it's cool to see that the students, because as you were mentioning earlier, John, U Chicago is not just renowned domestically, but internationally. And it's always great to see students come from a wide variety of backgrounds, come into the university and bring their history with them as well. And it only enriches our students' education because they're getting a wider scope of, okay, for let's say data science, for instance, this is what's happening in Brazil, right? Or this is what's happening in China, or this is what's happening in Japan, this is what's happening in India. And so it only enriches our students' education because they're not just learning the theoretical concepts, but they're being able to then say, here's how it's being applied into reality as well. And here are some of the political ramifications. Here's some of the business ramifications. It's not just purely theoretical. It has those real world implications too.
I could go on and on about the diversity of Chicago. I mean, the whole world is there, but just one bit of symbolism. If you walk outside of your building and just go to the Tribune Tower, along the walls of the Tribune Tower are various stones from landmarks across the world. There's a stone from the Great Wall of China, a piece of the Great Pyramid at Giza, a piece of the St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. And to me, it serves as a symbol of the fact that the world is in Chicago.
Right.
So Chicago is an amazing international city, but I want to dive a little bit deeper into your field of expertise. Could you speak to a little bit about what is applied data science today, and where do you see it going in the near future?
Yes. So the term data science is very broad. It's a very, when you look at from an academic standpoint, it is a new academic discipline, right? So you think of like economics, political science, these have been with us since, the terms at least late 1900s into the 20th century. Data science itself is a relatively new discipline. And it's exciting because very rarely do you have a new STEM discipline pop up. And so data science is really taking the foundations of computer science, statistics, and mathematics. And the way I always like to coin it, it's utilization of data to formulate a narrative to invoke change. And so, one example may be, using data to better predict, if somebody is likely to, let's say, drop out of a course, of an educational course, and being able to then provide interventions that prevent that negative outcome, right? So that's more of like a social good, public policy perspective of data science. But it can also be used for businesses as well, right? In terms of, okay, who truly is our market segment, and how do we cluster our different market segments with communication, right? And how do we market to different clusters of the market segmentation, so to speak. But it can also be used in healthcare. I think you may have heard, and I'm sure those who listen might be very familiar with the image processing, where machines have gotten better at saying, hey, this cluster of cells, this is a tumor, and we need to go in and intervene quickly. It's gotten better at predicting that than trained doctors when they look at the images. And so data science itself is broad. The applied component of it is saying, okay, there's the theoretical underpinnings of the discipline itself, right? So, think of like academia and what have you. The applied, and especially our Master's in Applied Data Science program, what we're trying to do is say, here's the theory, and you need to understand the theory. You need to understand how these different models work, how these different tools work. But you also need to recognize, okay, how are they actually being used in the real world? The real world, very rarely are things set up for the ideal situation. And we're talking about, hey, we don't have all the data we would love to have, to I'm working with a very difficult client who's being a pain. And, I have to kind of navigate those relationships I need to understand the political ramifications. If we move forward, the ethical considerations, which is really a hot topic right now in data science, is ethically, how should this tool be leveraged? How should it be used? When is it appropriate to use it? When is it not appropriate to use it? I was just sitting in a meeting And this was news. I always knew that there was an environmental cost with AI, but I didn't know like truly. And so I guess anytime you go to ChatGPT, for instance, and you ask it to write it, a sentence or what have you, or a story, um, you're using up a bottle of water to use that.
Wow. Huh.
Interesting, right? And
Yeah.
and and so you start to think like, well, does it make sense for kids to be using AI to say, I want Pikachu to be wearing a baseball hat? You start to, you know what I mean, though? You
Yeah.
start to kind of go, okay, well, how should this tool really be used and leveraged? And obviously, there's the political and security ramifications as well that people are worried about. But again, we're in our program, we're making you think about all of that, not just the technical. It's kind of that Jurassic Park when he says, your scientists were so concerned with if they could, they never stopped and asked if they should.
Should. Right.
And
Right.
and we want to make sure that you are having these conversations because again, it is a new frontier. Where everyone's kind of just, the imagery I use is when people are on ice on a lake and they don't know you're thinking, okay, it's pretty solid, but you're still hesitant that at one step, maybe the ice isn't as thick as you thought, and then you could, fall in. So I just that's how I get the sense that people are in the industry, how they're moving forward is, okay, let's keep pushing forward, but understand that at some point I feel like the ice is going to get thin and we need to be aware of that.
To use one pressing example in my mind of this very dilemma, with the TOEFL assessment, we take, for example, a student's speaking score. We have both AI and humans grade each speaking sample. And part of the reason we don't entirely trust the AI grading of those samples is there are so many different accents, so many different idiosyncratic English phrases that we're not entirely comfortable with just ceding that to the robots because the robots may be missing some nuances that they haven't hoovered up. And so it's a constant discussion here on the assessment front. Now let me ask you this. That's a great example of data science and applied data science. Talk to me a little bit more about a student who has done well in your program, has acquired the skills and the toolkit necessary to be an applied data scientist. When they go out into the world and pursue careers, you mentioned health. Are there other areas where you can leverage applied data science post-graduation?
So the answer to that question is many.
Infinite,
And
right?
it truly it is. And part of it is because you're kind of seeing another data evolution where, I mean, take for instance, let's take the automobile industry. Your automobile, for lack of a better term, in the future and already, but even more so in the future, it's going to be a computer. And you're going to have, let's take something like the Ford Mach-E as an example. So it's an electric car, but it has built into it, GPS. It has, it can tell how quickly you're driving, how often you brake, all of that information. So all of that data is getting sent back over to Ford, for lack of a better term. And they're looking to see, okay, maybe we don't need to offer, whatever the mile range is, the 350 or whatever it might be. Maybe they start to get more data back and they realize, people in electric cars aren't braking as much. They're not actually using the brake button. And that's how we regenerate energy to improve efficiency. So maybe we need to come up with some sort of new mechanism or it's looking at, okay, people in the Mach-E, this is really what they're doing, right? We can see their GPS. We can see how they're traveling now. With that comes questions of security, right? And questions of, well, is it right that Ford should use that data, right? We all know those agreements that we never read and that we just say, sure, and we move on. And so, but that's an example right there, like in the automobile industry. Finance is huge. Finance is always, it's been one of our when the program got started and even to today, it's a huge one. Healthcare, like I said, with not just with the image processing and relating to like what we would consider healthcare, but also helping hospitals and clinics to run more efficiently and more effectively. I think we've all been in those situations where, hey, we're on a phone call, we're trying to get an appointment set up, and well, let me dial it to, let me connect you to so and so, let me connect you to so and so, and you're on there for 2.5 hours. Where obviously you're going to have the version of chatbots, right? And those are going to be built out to say, hey, I need to see doctor. And to your point, John, it's, Some people might call him Dr. X, and others were going to call him by his first name or her first name. And so, how would we handle that situation, right? Whereas you would expect that, if my pediatrician or if my physician is a personal friend, and I call them by their first name, it's going to be kind of taken aback if the AI says, "Sorry, nobody of that name works here. You have the wrong number," right? And so that's going to be an example of, again, the real world implications of how AI is going to be leveraged and used with the human, at the center and the concern of it all. And then obviously you have like AI for cybersecurity and AI hacking and things of that nature. And so you have that cybersecurity angle. But it's really cool to see that our students come from a wide variety of backgrounds and interests. Sports analytics is a big one. Matter of fact, our students just did a capstone with the Chicago White Sox on looking at the how they're swinging, the velocity of the swing, the angle of the swing, and what's the best likelihood to lead to base hits and home runs, etc. Moneyball, essentially. I saw a project with in Spain. We had a company come to us from Spain for soccer, and it was more or less the same thing where, assists, when you're making an assist in soccer, well, it's an imbalanced data set. There's not a lot of scores in soccer, not a lot of goals. And so the question becomes, well, how do you evaluate a pass, if it's effective or not? And I mean, the data that they were looking at, where the players are positioned on the pitch, the velocity that the ball is hit, the spin rate of the ball, the time of the game, I mean, all of this data to then say, okay, this is, you can coin this as a good pass, you can coin this as an average pass, you can coin this as a bad pass. And I'm more of a baseball soccer, so some of the terminology was a little bit lost on me, but just the volume of data itself. And so I think I know I went a little bit on a tangent, but the question was with like data science in the industry, you're only going to see, I mean, the fact that I'm wearing a Fitbit watch right now, right? Fitbit, they're collecting that data. They're seeing my heart rate. They're seeing how many steps I'm taking. And from that, they can infer what a typical day looks like for me. And why is that valuable? Well, if they know that, hey, Daniel's not, in a position to make an impulse buy between the hours of 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., because, whatever we're looking at, it doesn't make sense to spend market ads, towards, him and what have you. So just tremendous different opportunities, both from business, social good, and private and sports. So it's really exciting to just kind of see what our students, and the field just keeps growing and it keeps evolving.
Yes.
And that's the other thing we tell our students when they come in the program is that, we can't teach you everything. There's just no way. The field is constantly growing. But what we want to do is you leave with the foundation so that as the field continues to grow, you can grow with it.
Sure.
And it's one of those fields where you're constantly going to need to be educating yourself if you want to stay at the forefront, which some students like because they, otherwise they get bored, and other students go, I kind of want to be, tell me what I need to know and I can go on and do it. And this is much more of it's constantly evolving. And so it's exciting. But it can also be a little daunting as well.
That's a great piece of advice, that there's ambiguity built into the field, and a certain degree of comfort with uncertainty and novelty is probably a necessary condition. I have to add one footnote too, because I love sports. You mentioned Lionel Messi, the Argentinian superstar. I read something a few years back about it's soccer or football, as some of our listeners would know it as. Yes, although you did say pitch, so kudos to pitch. They did an analysis of the distance football players travel on the pitch during a game. And the player that traveled the shortest amount of distance was Lionel Messi.
I think I saw something about this, yeah.
Yes, and so it forced them to reconsider the use of that data, because he is very selective with the spots that he picks. And anyway, sports analytics is so complicated. In football in particular, that's a fun place where innovation is rewarded. Well, Daniel, it's a vast field that's really the cutting edge of innovation. You referenced that students probably who excel in the program are comfortable with some degree of innovation. But do you have any other tips, especially for students that are looking at your graduate program, applying any advice for international students looking to go to U Chicago?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is to don't be hesitant to reach out directly to the university. For instance, I have a team. We love talking with prospective students. We have office hours time set up so we can meet virtually Zoom, just like this. So even if you're not currently living in the United States, you can still get in touch with us and we can still have a one-on-one conversation. We want to make sure that, we're giving you the data, no pun intended, but the data that you need to make the best decision, right? And so, websites are great, but it doesn't kind of give you the culture and the heart of the program. It kind of gives you the logistical information. And so if you kind of want to get connected with a current student, a former student, if you want to attend a data science seminar series, I think that's always the best way to figure out, is this something I want to do, to move forward in my career, is to collect as many data points as you can. Obviously, you'll never be, I always joke when I talk with students one-on-one, I'll say, you're never going to be 100% confident, right? But you want to be 95% confident that this is the right, next step for my career and for what I want to do. The other thing to note is that our international deadline for the full-time in-person program tends to be in January for those that are going to be applying for the visa for the first time. So the full-time in-person program is visa eligible. And we're also OPT eligible since we're a STEM designated program as well. In terms of like preparing for the program itself, I mean, obviously, we want to make sure you have some programming experience in either R or Python. There's great resources out there too. Kaggle is a great resource. It's completely free. They have competitions. I mean, I'm sure some of those who will end up listening to this are familiar with that. But that's a great resource where you can kind of go and test your data skills and explore different open data sets and just start to play around with the data. I always say it's best to do by doing and by failing and, trying different techniques and realizing, hey, because you can read about this field all day long and you can read about all these different techniques all day long. But until you really get in there and get your hands dirty and start playing around with the data, all of that kind of abstract theoretical starts to become more real and concrete and it's tangible then, and then you can hold it. But you should also know we have students from all across the world come into our program. And what I think students really value about our program is we try to make sure that they're not just here to take their classes and then, hey, by the way, go do your own thing, on the other times. Our student service team does a great job. Our student affairs team, they host different events. We just had Valentine's Day, a few weeks ago, and they bought donuts for everyone in the student lounge, and so students could go in there and kind of treat themselves. And we've had like kickoff events where to kick off the quarter or the year, I should say, they'll rent out an entire restaurant, and so people can come. And usually it's a restaurant that has like you could play bags or I'm thinking of the game with the sliding and you get the triangle. Well, anyway, it's one of those games, the shuffleboard or something.
Yeah, yeah.
Shuffleboard. Thank you.
Yeah.
So they do a great job of doing that, and I think that's important for international students and students in general to know that part of your learning journey is the network you're building, and we want to encourage that to build your network. Obviously, having a network is extremely important for getting jobs and what have you, but it's also important because when you're studying alongside others, they're going to challenge and push you. And you're going to learn from them because they're going to have a vantage point that's different than your own. And so how else can you, have your vantage point questioned if you're not surrounding yourself with people who are interested in the same subject, but might be coming from it at a different perspective. And so that's only going to challenge you. And that's really important when we have our capstone project. Then the capstone project, I think, is probably the feature that makes us stand out in this very competitive space, in that we partner you with an actual industry partner, and you go and you take on a real life data science project. So it's not a hypothetical. It's not, hey, let's say theoretically if we no, this is Northern Trust. This is the Chicago White Sox. This is Chicago Medicine. This is, Deloitte. They're coming to us and saying, we have this problem and we want to try to, look for a potential solution. And now sometimes the projects our students are working on is one piece of a bigger pie, and sometimes it is the whole pie. It really just depends on the project. But you work in a team, right? So you're working with a team, 3 to 4, you have a client, and the whole goal here is ideally you have a deliverable that the client utilizes, and that gets added to your portfolio. So when you go in for a job interview, especially if you're coming straight out of undergrad, you can go in and say, not only have I taken these classes in data science, but, let's say you're interested in going into finance, Northern Trust, BMO, they were looking to improve their fraud detection algorithm, and here's how this is what we did. This was the deliverable. Here were some problems we encountered, and here's how we were creative to overcome those problems, and here were the solutions we provided. So I think that's something that international students should know. When you're in this program, you're gaining access not just to the curriculum and to the professors, but to your classmates and to the broader university as well. Definitely check out the Data Science Institute at the University of Chicago as well. Fellowships, internships, full-time employment opportunities. There's a lot of energy for data science behind, the university has placed a lot of energy behind data science. And again, we don't want to just be a player in the industry, we want to be an innovator. And
Right.
when you want to be an innovator, you have to take risks, and some of those risks are not going to pan out. But it also means surrounding yourself with the best in the industry and making sure that you're advancing the industry itself as a discipline. And that's why we do have the PhD and then the master's in data science, which is designed to prepare people for more of a doctoral route going on and advancing data science itself as a discipline.
Well, U Chicago is truly at the nexus of both academic and industry excellence. But as you referenced earlier, it was a finalist to be Hogwarts. And I want to emphasize, too, there's a certain warmth both in Hyde Park and downtown. U Chicago is, I think, smaller than students might suspect. And you prepared to be challenged there, but I also know there's a very collaborative spirit. And to bring back the quote from Jurassic Park, you should apply to the applied data science program. And Daniel, you're a great representative for the program and the university, and thank you so much for sharing a little bit more about the magic of U Chicago with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you, John.